The streaming has begun. The streaming has begun. Let's see. I got that green light. Boom. We are live. A great thing to be. A great thing to be alive. A privilege, really. All right. If it's your first time here, I have to go and like copy and paste the link onto Twitter and everything. I think it lends a little bit of charm to the show. You know, you get to see me casually, just, you know, off the cuff, real life, you know, not scripted, not pretending to be fake, not hiding behind a facade. This is really me right now. I'm really actually copying and pasting the link onto Twitter. How rare to get a glimpse into someone's real, unfiltered, actual life. That's it. That's really why you go on the internet, really. Going into a folder called website stuff, getting the pic, and I'm posting it on Twitter. And you know we have room for, this is what really brings the people into the show. When they see the tweet, when they see the post, you need the TV emoji. You need the television emoji. It subtextually communicates. It says, hey, come through. We're going to watch. You're going to relax, hang out. It's going to be a great time. They love seeing the TV emoji. Boom. It's been tweeted. It's been tweeted. People are here. What's going on? What's going on, guys? What else do I need to do really quick? Did I see Jonathan? I don't know how to say Jonathan's last name, but he's a great guy. Check him out if you haven't checked out his stuff. If you like my stuff, you would definitely like his stuff, by the way. Jonathan Pageau. Pageau. He had me on his show. It was actually really... It's a really good time. I'm going to try and get back on his show when I drop my book. I'm just going to shamelessly hit him up and say, hey, I am shilling myself to you. That's crazy. He did a Mark of Cain video. Actually, I will check that out because I have been thinking about that recently. That's funny. You know, I think I mentioned this before, but, you know, he's one of those guys. He's a really cool guy. He's one of those guys where I don't actually check out his stuff that much because I feel like, not that we're similar, but we're on like a similar-ish wavelength. Our wavelengths are tangential. So I see like a video of his come up and I'm like, oh, I should check that out. And then I'm like, well, but the thing is then maybe I'll just end up like accidentally jacking like what he's saying. So sometimes I end up not checking out his stuff, but I want to. I'm going to sit down and like binge a lot of it. Sometimes I watch like his older stuff just because like I said, I don't want to be like accidentally stealing what someone's, you know, dropping up and coming. Maybe that's stupid, though. Maybe that's not really logical. All right. Put the video on Telegram. Sometimes I think about posting to Instagram, but I don't. Instagram is the forgotten stepchild of the show, of the Owen Cyclops universe, unfortunately. What's going on? What's going on? I'm going to move my windows around here. Tried to start before 7. We'll hang for a sec, let people come in. If you haven't seen the show before, maybe you're watching it later or something, we're going to hang for a minute, and then we'll kick off the real show. We'll hang out for like 3-4 minutes, let people come in. How's it going, though? It's going really well over here. Usually in the pre-show, we talk about me a little bit, I guess. I got some people painting my house. That's kind of crazy, so I'm moving. And I'm very obsessive visually, obviously. That's very conducive to being an artist. And I thought I could get away with like not changing the colors of the house, but they were just off enough that I was okay like dropping the time and energy to paint it and stuff. I was like, I could live with this, you know, for a while, but I almost wanted to like post the colors on Twitter, but then I was like, I don't know, like blogging. I don't really like feel like I'm sharing too much of my life. But that's cool. That's going down. I would have painted it myself, but I had to like fix these wall things. It's kind of exciting, but not really. Otherwise, I've had a crazy reading time. We'll talk about some stuff I've been reading recently. I'm just organizing the paints over here. Any good anecdotes for the pre-show? I went to a state fair. That's a good one. We missed the show 2 weeks ago. Last week. It was last week, actually. and I went to this kind of, it wasn't really a state fair, but that's kind of what it was like. Maybe like a city fair or like a rural area fair. Sometimes if you drive through like rural areas, they'll have like the sheep fair, and it's like a fair with like rides, and I guess it's organized around like some sheep or something. It's pretty awesome, honestly. And I went, and it was really cool because this is a good anecdote to start the show, and then I'll pull the trigger right when I wrap this up. What's up, everybody? I'm glad you're all here. I see people in the chat. Yeah, so I went, and in a way, I feel very welcomed by the rural people. I'm like, I'm really like deep down like a filthy suburbanite. I'm not really an urbanite. I'm a suburbanite, but I did abscond from an urban area, and I cope about it by saying, well, you know, my family is like from this state, you know, X, Y, and Z, so many generations back, but I really don't belong, and they accept me, which I appreciate. It's funny, I meet people and they're like, where are you from? And like, I say where I'm from, and then I always want to follow it up with, but on my mom's side, someone fought for the Civil War for this state. Like, so I'm not really a poser. Like, I know I'm here, but I'm not really like one of those people, you know, I'm not like a carpetbagger, sorry. But I don't do that every time I meet someone, but I feel like I should. Anyway, so I went to the state fair, and it was pretty cool. The best part, I thought about you guys actually, because I enjoy sharing sort of folk, religion, observations and moments with you guys and hearing you guys talk about them also. So I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting in the bleachers. This is a very perfect moment for me. I'm sitting in these bleachers, and we're overlooking this, it's not really a field. It's more like a pit. It's more like maybe like kids would play like soccer there, but it's not grass. It's like dirt. I actually don't know what it was. It was a big dirt field. And there's fences set up and everything, and they bring out this guy to give him like this farm family award. They're like, all right, we're going to bring out Ted Davidson to get the farm family award. And they bring him out, and it was my dentist. So I watched my dentist get this like farm family award with his like massive family and all these kids. So I'm like, all right, this is pretty wholesome. I'm really down. This is a really good time already. And then they were going to do some events. They were going to do lawnmower racing. They were going to do this event where kids try and catch this pig. They grease up a pig, and they let it run through this like dirt field, I guess, and kids try and catch this greasy pig. So I was amped. I'm like, all right, I'm locked in for a great evening right now. And before they did that, the guy's announcing it. He had everyone stand up, and he said this like super long prayer to God. And it was pretty awesome, because I was thinking, wow, back where I'm from, if someone did this, if someone had everyone stand up before some event and say, you know, we want to thank you, God, for giving us your son, Jesus, and his precious blood that washes away our sins. If someone did that back where I'm from, there would literally be like a riot, unironically. So it was pretty awesome. It was a pretty blessed time, but then it rained, and I didn't get to see the lawnmower races. I did not get to see kids catch a greased up pig, but I did get to see, this was very spiritually rewarding, and then I'm going to pull the trigger on the intro right now. But I got to see an event called, they called it lamb busting. Have you heard of lamb busting? They had an event where children line up, and it's like a rodeo where, you know, you try and stay on I don't know what a rodeo, I've never been to a rodeo. You try and stay on a bull or something, but they tried to stay on these sheep. So they had these sheep, and they just had these kids grab on the sheep and just send them out into the dirt field. And the sheep are like bucking and trying to throw the kids off. And some kids got thrown off like immediately. Some kids rode the sheep for like 5 to 10 seconds. But it was pretty awesome. It was definitely like super dangerous, because the kids, like literally, I should draw it so you can imagine it. They're grabbed onto the sheep, just holding on for dear life. And the sheep's running out in the field. But eventually they drift off the side of the sheep, you know. So the kids latched on. This is perfect. This kids latched onto the top of the sheep, and they drift on. And eventually they just slip under the sheep, and that's how they fall off. So every single time you're like watching the kid's head, and you're wondering, you know, which one of these kids is going to get kicked in the face by a sheep. I mean, it's basically inevitable. But we watched like 20 or 30 of those, and then it was raining too hard. It was also raining. That also made it funnier. So now all of a sudden these sheep are like wet, and the kids are like not really happy, and they're wet, and they're grabbed onto these sheep, and they're sent out into this dirt field, and the dirt's like turning into mud. It's a really good time, actually. It's a really, really, really great time. And that's why I didn't do the show last week. So that's enough pre-show. It's time for the reason we all came here, the real show. Let's do this. right. Let's do it. How's it going, everyone? I'm glad you're here. I'm very amped to be here, obviously. And let's just jump right in. So, if you've seen the show before, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but I pretty much always, we run a spectrum from boom, we have a concrete idea, we're heading towards this goal that we virtually imagine in our minds already, and then the other end we're really just straight up winging it. And I like to oscillate wildly between those two extremes. It's good creatively, it's good for the show, it's good for a lot of reasons. And I sat down and I was thinking, I like to get a little bit of a bullseye in the distance, a little bit of, okay, where are we going with the show? And normally I have one concept or something in my mind. Maybe it relates to a picture I drew before or a symbol I want to use or something. But I was sitting here for a while and I wasn't really sure what to pick because I have all these things like floating around in my mind right now. Because I've been reading a lot more than I normally do. And I thought, instead of trying to force it, instead of like, I was opening books and closing books, and I thought, let's just go for it. And sometimes it's interesting. I do this a lot when I'm doing art, even off the stream in real life, quote unquote, where you just have a few ideas floating around in your mind, and you just kind of make a picture based on that. So I thought we would do something like that to get you guys up, so to give you just a window into the meta-creative aspect to see what's floating around in the cauldron before we start reaching our hand in there and pulling stuff out. I read the entire, it's pretty absurd, honestly. I read the entire Book of Mormon. I can't believe I finished it. I think I finished it after we did the last show, so I don't think I mentioned finishing it. But I did. It's like over 500 pages, and I read the entire thing. I really could not believe I read the whole thing, honestly. It was pretty epic. I don't think we talked about this last time on the show, so sorry if I'm repeating myself. But it was pretty epic. Maybe we'll talk about it, maybe we won't. But I feel like I really pumped up my 1800s America studies by consuming the whole thing. And I really was able to put myself in the mindset of someone who was in the 1800s and just found this book and was reading it. So I was repping the Salt Lake City cap. There's an esoteric symbolism connection there. Salt Lake City, obviously. And after I read that, so we're going to do a little just 5-minute intro and then we'll jump in. So I read that, and then there's this other book called Pearl of Great Price, and I really wanted to hit that because apparently that's more of like the, I guess you would say like esoterica in a way. The Book of Mormon really is like an entire self-contained narrative. I mean, it relates to other things, but it really is like, here's the start, we're going to go through all this stuff, here's the end. And I guess it's really kind of one of the first things that Joseph Smith wrote, I guess. But eventually, he writes this thing called the Pearl of Great Price, and there's books in there that are extra biblical narratives. So there's a book called the Book of Moses that's like about Moses. There's a book called the Book of Abraham that's like about Abraham. And I thought that was where the more like kind of frankly, like just speaking off the cuff here, like freaky, weird stuff is, like just strange things. So I read that also. So I read those two things. It was pretty interesting. Maybe we'll talk about that too. And I was just trucking along. I was like, wow, I'm really making a lot of ground here. I'm going pretty swiftly here. And I wanted to zoom out and pause for a second. And part of the reason why I wanted to look into all this stuff is that part of the way my brain works, people ask me like, and like what theology stuff should I read? What religious book should I read? And the way my brain works is holding ideas in opposition to each other. That's why I like debates and arguments, finding someone who says X about one thing, someone who says Y about one thing, and, seeing who's right and who's wrong and what their view on X, Y, and Z is. It's really how my brain takes in information. So I thought that I could zoom out for a second and look at some of the concepts I was hitting, because a lot of them, whether they're interpreted correctly or incorrectly, are things that I should know about, but I really don't, which brings me to what I have laid out right here. So a big part of the whole Mormon thing is the restoration of what they see as like the restoration of Christianity, like as it was supposed to be. And then there was this great apostasy, and now Joseph Smith is going to fix it. And this term that kept coming up was the melchizedek priesthood. And I was like, I've heard that a lot. I've heard in Orthodox stuff, I've seen people talk about the Melchizedek priesthood. This term's like come up all throughout my sort of religious readings, but I don't really know that much about it. I couldn't really explicate what it actually is in standard Christian theology. And it's funny, I have this book right here, and the first time I ever heard this term, Melchizedek, is I had this book. This is a really original, crazy, like not crazy like we're crazy, like totally completely insane new age book, it's all about this guy who gets in touch with this Egyptian deity and writes about Atlantis, and you can see like crystalline grids surrounding the earth and Egyptian gods and aliens and Lemuria and all these islands sinking into the ocean. And I read this back when, frankly, I was doing the most drugs in my life. And I was like, wow, this book's pretty awesome. It's really out there. I'm not necessarily recommending it. I'm just telling you a story right now. Sort of an original mix-up of science and New Age thought book. And I had it around my apartment, and my roommate, who was studying theology at the time, came by and said, oh, it's by Drunvalo Melchizedek. And I said, yeah, I guess that's his name. Yeah, and he was like, that's a pretty ballsy name to choose. And I said, why? And he said, that's not his real name. And he said, Melchizedek is this priest in the Old Testament. It's like the lineage of Jesus. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. I didn't know anything about it. That was like 10 years ago. So anyway, I decided to look into it. Like I said, I've heard about it a little bit. I know a little bit about it. But I thought I would really poke into it. And I was kind of surprised because the first time it's mentioned in the Bible, this priest named Melchizedek, it's really just this tiny little window. It's this tiny little passage right here. And we're going to read it in a second, but basically, in case you have no idea what I'm talking about, some people are like, dude, this is 101 stuff. I know all about this. Some people might not know anything about what I'm talking about right now. But basically, in certain like theological lenses, I guess you could say, it's not really the right way to put it, but it's kind of hard to boil down these concepts casually. But in certain angles, I guess I'll say, there's the contrast between the Aaronic priesthood and the Melchizedek priesthood. Like there's the contrast between the Mosaic law and Christ's law, and he's like this forerunner of Jesus in a way. In fact, in one of the commentaries I was reading, it was saying that this priest could be like a theophany of Jesus, which I thought was a pretty out there idea. But anyway, let's just quickly read this passage and then we'll jump in to painting and stuff like that. So we're in Genesis chapter 14, so we're just trucking along out of the Garden of Eden and lots of other things happening, Abraham moving along. And it's just 2 paragraphs. Let's see what it says here. Then the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Shaveh, that is the king's valley, after his return from the slaughter of Chedorlaomer, and the kings with him. Now Melchizedek, the king of Salem, was brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of the God Most High. He blessed Abraham and said, Blessed be Abram of God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hands. Then Abram gave him a tithe of all. Now the king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the people, and keep the cavalry for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand to the God Most High. And then it just kind of honestly goes on with Abraham's story here. So I thought it was interesting because I've read this before. I've actually read Genesis a bunch of times. And I guess if you're just reading along, this wouldn't really stand out to you because, frankly, if you're just a casual person, it's just something random that happens, it seems like, right? But eventually theologically, or you could say originally theologically, it doesn't really matter. The fact that Abraham gives a tithe to this guy and that this guy blesses Abraham takes on this like huge significance. So I thought it was interesting. And I got a lot more to say. I read the book of Hebrews too, which relates to like marrying Christ with the Melchizedek priesthood. Actually, it's really more about like how Christ is part of this like higher priesthood than the Jews have. But I want to start painting and stop talking, so we'll kind of jump into it and we'll keep going right over here. So I thought it would be interesting because I really liked that idea of this priest as a theophany of Jesus. In case some people don't know, a theophany is basically like a divine vision. I think the most famous or the most well-known theophanies are Moses' theophanies. In the Old Testament, Moses sees God's back at one point. Moses goes up on Mount Sinai and sees God. That's a theophany. So I thought it was really interesting to think like, oh, maybe this priest is like a theophany of Christ. That's what it said in the Orthodox study notes. So I thought it'd be interesting to take that symbol of like priesthood, power, consolidated, passed via lineages. And the other last thing I'll say before we jump in is I also am finding a lot more interesting, frankly, kind of esoteric tie-ins from Old Testament symbolism to New Testament symbolism by going deeper into this, again, frankly, like weirder stuff. Just to give you a window into a really good one is, I think this is explicitly in the book of Hebrews, but I'm not totally sure. But when Cain slays Abel, God comes down and says, what's going on, man? What's going on? And he says, Abel's blood is crying onto me. So I'm going to give you a curse. Basically, Abel's blood causes a curse to go upon Cain. And later, that blood that curses is seen as an inverse of Jesus's blood, which blesses. So you have like the Old Testament blood that curses, and then the New Testament blood that blesses. I thought that was really cool. Mount Sinai and Mount Zion being like these inverses of each other. You go up on Mount Sinai and it's like a scary encounter with God, and then Mount Zion is like this blessed encounter with God. The priesthoods, the covenants. So I just kind of been going a little bit deeper into that like interesting flip and parallels. I guess you would call that typology, but casually I would say it's kind of like inverses and parallels. Anyway, that's what's on my mind right now. And let's just jump right in. I think what we'll do is we'll have maybe like a figure right here in the center, and then we'll have stuff around them. I'm really intrigued by this idea and figure of a priest and like the priesthood and that kind of thing, but to be honest with you, I don't really know how I would manifest that visually. So I just wanted to wing it with you guys a little bit and just see what happens, because it's an interesting set of symbols. I mean, a priest, even the one we just read about, it's partially a king. You know, he's a king, but he's also a priest, so it has to do with like justice and mercy and doing God's law and also like speaking for God. And it's all these different things mixed together, which I thought was really interesting. I see people are tagging me in the chat, so I will read it in a second, but we have to decide, you know, if you come here often, you know, the first move, the biggest move is we have to decide what color we're going to start with. And something about the priesthood thing makes me think of purple, honestly. It's like a royal color. Christ later has those purple robes. Purple in general is associated with royalty and things like that. So I got these magentas out. Magenta's not exactly purple, but I think it's a little bit classier than the dioxazine violet I have. You can see this color, even if it's not in focus. Perfect. So this is really magenta. The other purple I have, it's called dioxazine violet. It's the coldest color in the palette. I think it's just too dark. It's a really icy, cold purple, and I think it's going to lock us into a cold color palette. I think this, even though this seems like a really intense color, it'll give us more room to move around. We can go into the warm colors. It'll work with blues, yellows, oranges, things like that. So we're going to start with this color right here. Yeah. Santi G in the chat said, seeing Melchizedek always reminds me of that spirit science guy. Yeah, the book I plugged in the beginning is like a really big source for like a resurgence of a lot of like New Age stuff and things like that. Have you ever heard of the Order of Melchizedek? It was a cult in the 70s, heavily intertwined with UFO phenomenon. No, I've never heard of that. Sounds pretty cool though. Melchizedek gets mentioned during the Catholic Mass. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But it's kind of interesting, right? Because, you know, more and more, the deeper I go into this stuff, I kind of lose my grip on what is common knowledge and what isn't. So that's kind of a perfect example because, yeah, I mean, it's almost like Christology 101. It's almost like Study of Christ 101, but I don't really think a lot of people know about it. I couldn't have, like, written a page on it, you know, before I looked into all this stuff over the last week. And we'll talk more about some other things like that, but let's get going here. So I don't want to make it like a picture of anyone in particular. I just want to kind of explore the ideas visually here. And I want to do something interesting with the face. Let's do something interesting with the head. I mean, we could make it a face like of a guy, but it's not that exciting, honestly. When I think of theophanies, I think of not really being a strict visual, you know, like we see earthly phenomenon. So just intuitively, I'm going to go with an interesting shape here. I'm going to go with one of my favorite shapes, which is two squares intersecting. It's not exactly a square, it really is more of a diamond, but it'll be okay for our purposes. And I really like the 8-pointed star that I'm using here a lot. I got a book on Orthodox iconography recently, and it had a lot of these two overlapping squares in the halos. And in the commentary it said the 8-pointed star represents the 7 days of creation, and then the 8th kind of moment of eternity afterwards, I guess is how I would phrase that. So I thought that was pretty cool. And it's one of my favorite shapes anyway, so I said, yeah, we'll use that. I'll take that. Hold on, I'm just grabbing paper towels, my bad. Perfect. Sorry, I'm just moving some books around. Cool. And I like this pink color. Pink does have kind of a visionary quality. Some people might know this, but Magenta is actually not part of like the natural wavelength of colors. We'll go a little faster here. I don't want to get bogged down in the details. That always happens. Magenta is not part of the natural wavelength of colors. That's why there's no magenta in the rainbow. I don't know if you ever thought about that, but there's not. It's actually a color that your eye creates. That's part of why, in my opinion, it has this luminous quality to it. It's really the color that's in between other wavelengths. There's not one wavelength of light that is magenta. And that gives it part of its ethereal quality. And let's just throw in a little bit of a glow. Just come here, wet the fibers a little bit. There's some pink on the brush, but it's not a big deal. And we'll get a nice like glow. Let's get some big like painterly colors going on. The last few episodes, it's actually been going really well. But we keep getting bogged down in like details, you know, little tiny details. Let's get some big, powerful moves happening here. I'm just gonna come in. Boom. Ideally, I should leave a little bit of a gap between the star and the paper that I'm wetting. And we're gonna have to decide if we want to make it dark to light or light to dark. You get two very different effects with the glow if you go from light to dark or dark to light. It's a little bit more atypical, I suppose, to go light to dark, so let's do that. So I'm just gonna come in here, throw in this yellow. This is lemon yellow, so it's the cool yellow. Perfect. Perfect, and then while it's wet, we'll come in with the cadmium yellow. Perfect. Let's come around, it's perfect. And because I was reading all this stuff about the priesthoods, what I was reading kept referencing the book of Hebrews, which is a letter in the New Testament. What's the outside color here? You know, I'm going to take the magenta and just mix it a little bit with the cadmium yellow. That'll be our outside color. Perfect. It's cool. It's a good color. It's like kind of a weird red. Or orange. Let's see, can we get one more layer deeper? Cool. That last ring, I kind of wish there was a little bit more like variation in here. I'm wondering, you know, I'm just going to do it. This is going to be the intuitive moves episode. But I'm going to come in with some orange and see if we can get some rings going on. I'm just going to grab this orange. We're out of cadmium orange. This is a color called Orange Lake Deep. It's more transparent, which actually works for this purpose perfectly. Let's see, what if we just come in? So it's still wet, so if I come in with the color, it just kind of fuzzes out like that. Maybe I'll just come in between these colors. Cool. Looks pretty good already, actually. And I want this to be dark. I want this to be like really thick color on the outside. Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. Perfect. In case we get some blood or something going on the outside later. Yeah, there we go. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is that, so let's put him in some, I want to have his arms out here, and then in the story he's holding bread and wine. So obviously, we're probably going to roll with that. It's two of the most like classical symbols. But I don't know how exactly we should do his body. I guess we'll just kind of come out with the robes. And we'll just have these like big, almost like medieval, really like 480 to 1000 AD, those big like flat paw hands coming out. I'm a little torn here if I'm going to put him in robes that are the same color as the head. Doesn't feel like exactly the move. Maybe I'll use that dark purple. We'll use that dark purple. Let's just go with it. Oh yeah, I punctured this last time because I couldn't open it. Perfect. I'll throw down this robe right now. So yeah, so in this time I read the book of Hebrews also. It's kind of cool because a lot of the stuff I'm reading, I can hit in these short bursts. Because I'm a workaholic, I really never have time to sit down and like read. But a lot of this stuff, you can read the book of Hebrews in like 45 minutes. It's pretty short, actually. So I did. And it's a letter someone wrote. I say someone because some of the stuff I read said people assume it's Paul, but it could be anyone writing it. I don't know how blasphemous that is, but that's what I read. If I read it in the Orthodox Study Bible, I think, okay, this isn't totally out there then. If like a modern academic person says something, I really don't care. But if it's in like a legit study Bible, I'll take it. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to angle this because I want to have his hands up. And then, let's see, I'll come in with these like folds on the robe. Perfect. And if it doesn't look perfect, we can always come in and like fuzz it out with something else later. It's not really going to matter. But the letter is interesting because I'm going to try and like maybe mix it up a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and see if I can have this come down like into another shape. Cool. We're totally going off the chart right now. We're going off the map right now. Yeah, it looks pretty cool. Let's just see how it goes. It's been a while since we really like truly winged it together. Maybe we'll have it like be a cloud, like maybe he's like morphing in and out of this cloud. As long as we're not doing a strict like portrait of someone, we can basically do whatever we want. Cool. So I'm going to come in here with the magenta for the hands. It will marry the face and the hands together. And yeah, basically what Hebrews is it was presumably written to a bunch of Jews who had converted to Christianity, but then were thinking about going back to being Jewish. That's kind of the subtext of it. So the author of the letter is writing all about how Christ's priesthood is superior to any other priesthood. So it's pretty cool because it's all about Christ as the ultimate high priest. And I feel like maybe on the ground, or at least in my own studies, you could say, one of the coolest titles for Christ, one of the coolest lenses for Jesus that gets the least play is Christ as the high priest. I mean, that's really awesome. Everyone knows he's like the sacrificial lamb, right? That's like 101. But him as the priest, I guess you could say as well, is also very interesting to me, and that's what the whole letter is about. Perfect. So it contrasts his priesthood with the terrestrial priesthood, and it goes through almost like these bullet points, like, the earthly priesthood is imperfect, it can't solve man's basic problems, the priests have to keep making these sacrifices over and over, and then Christ's priesthood is totally different. It's not by mortal men, it's perfect, it can solve these problems, so it almost goes through this like point by point. It's pretty cool, actually. Okay. I'm going to come in and shade this in, but let's get the bread and wine going in here. I'm just going to grab bread color. I mean, is that crazy? I'm just going to grab the color of bread. This is a very dull color, though. I don't want to dampen what we have going on here, which is very lively, so I'm going to use this raw sienna instead. I'm going to open this up. And actually, it's interesting. So I'm just glancing at the chat. I will, like, dive in, but I'm glancing back and forth. Spoon of Salty said, final question, is it faith or works? Another question we're not going to answer on the painting show. What was it a few weeks ago? Like the problem of evil? But it's interesting, actually, because as I was reading along in Hebrews, it actually kind of addresses that. It says at one point, it mentions people not making it, basically not being saved because of disobedience. And then a few paragraphs later, it mentions people not being saved because of lack of faith. So I noticed that, and I said, oh, that's interesting. And I checked the notes. And in the Orthodox Study Bible, it said, basically, yeah, it's both. It said, these two things go together and are inextricably intertwined. I don't know if that's exactly what it said, but that was the gist of it. That's kind of always how I felt with the faith and works thing. It reminds me of one of those theological problems where, like, by pinning it too hard on one side, you can kind of convince yourself it goes one way or the other. I don't really think either side really gives the other a fair hearing, you could say. Although I do love hearing people argue about it, the faith versus works thing. In case people don't know what we're talking about, some people aren't into like, studying religion or whatever. But that's one of the main differences you could say between different branches of Christianity is whether you're saved. If I was going to parody both sides, I'll be fair and give a caricature of both sides. On one side, literally just saying, I believe in Jesus, gets you saved. And on the other side, you have to do all this stuff to get saved. Give an unfair hearing to both sides. And that's the source of a lot of like argumentation. But it's interesting, yeah, because right in there, I mean, people can just read it. You should. It says both. It mentions people not being saved because of lack of faith, and it mentions people not being saved because of things they've done, which would be disobedience. So I'm going to come in and just throw down this wine glass. A little interesting personal note here is I actually totally stopped using like wine and wine symbolism in my art when I stopped drinking. But I think I'm ready to bring it back. It's pretty crucial, obviously, to the whole Christian symbolic framework. I'm just going to throw down this wine glass right here. Boom. It's interesting, wine, It has like positive and almost negative symbols in a way. I often think about that, There must be some reason why wine was chosen, if you want to put it that way. Chosen by God, or however you want to think of it. It's interesting because wine, like drinking can be a bad thing, It's interesting that what was chosen would be something that has this potential for being, I don't know what word to use, inverted, I guess you could say. It is interesting. Nice. Cool. So got the bread and the wine. I'm going to put some kind of like auras around these too. Let's just get the aura thing going. Let's come around here with the red. Nice. I really like the wine and blood symbolism together. When I'm painting, I really like using wine and grapes together. It implies like time passing. I did a wedding portrait for someone recently, and perfect. Yes. I used a lot of symbols that implied things like improving over time and getting better over time. And I think the wine and the grapes is the most intuitive one. Pretty much anyone can see that and say, oh yeah, that's what happens. Boom. Oh, man, I love color, really. Just painting and using color is so satisfying. So someone in the chat in the very beginning was like, yeah, cool, I'm glad you're doing the show. I'm having this. You didn't say like, I'm having a rough time, but it's kind of like what you implied, I guess. And honestly, just like working with color is so mentally satisfying. Honestly, it really is just so cathartic. Cathartic is really the word that I'm looking for. So if anyone's been looking for something to just maybe relax their mind a little bit, I would highly recommend that. Obviously. I'm just going to pull the colors out here. Yeah. You can even see right here, when you start getting, I always forget this because I'm so worried about, frankly, like, not that I'm worried about not messing things up, but obviously I want it to go well when people are watching me. But when you get the colors mixing together and you get this like flow between them, that's really when you get the best effect out of the paint. So try and pump that up a little bit more. Even right now, I can kind of pull some of this orange out a little bit more. The bread color is pretty close to orange, so. Perfect. So I also have to poke into, it's funny also, like with studying stuff, I feel like once you open one topic, it's like you go further and further and further. So I have to go back in and look at some of the older priesthoods like Levi and Aaron and all that stuff. I really don't have like a map of it in my mind. I feel like the last time I hit the Old Testament, I was just kind of going in like narrative mode. I was literally just going through in like a what happens sense. Now I can go a little bit deeper and see how it intersects with the New Testament, obviously. I'm also really enjoying like the going into it, frankly, with the Mormon stuff also. I'm not going to lie. Man, these colors, man, we're doing a great job right now. Because like I said, part of how my brain works is seeing things in contrast. And of course, they have like a totally different view, so it's interesting having that like foil as I'm going through. Actually, I learned something I didn't even know the other day. I was listening to something as I was walking my dog, and this guy mentioned baptism for the dead. I don't know if people know, but Mormons do baptism for the dead. They'll literally baptize someone in the place of someone who died. So if you have some relative, I think I'm giving this an accurate assessment. If you have like some old relative, like let's say your grandfather or something, and let's say you became Mormon and you were worried that he like wasn't baptized, you could get baptized. You could baptize him basically. I don't know if they baptize someone in his place or how they do it exactly, but that's a thing. And this guy was talking about it. He was defending it. Someone else was saying it's ridiculous. They were kind of having an argument about it. It's my jam, people arguing. And one guy said, well, you know, it is mentioned in the Bible. And the other guy's like, what are you talking about? And it's in Corinthians. It's passingly mentioned, possibly as a negative thing. So it's not like it's mentioned like, this is great, let's do it. But in 1 Corinthians, passingly, it is mentioned almost as like a gotcha point. It's written like, well, if you think X about Y, then if they think X about Y, why would they bother baptizing the dead? So it's not written as like, this is something we should do. But I saw it in there and I said, whoa, what's that? What's the deal with that? And I looked up some commentary on it, and there were some guys in like 400 AD, that was the earliest I could find, who said, yeah, one of them said some early Christians were doing it, one of them said some weirdos were doing it. So again, I'm not saying it's like some secret I uncovered, but apparently some people in the early Christian times, whether they were Gnostics and being heretical or whatever, I didn't really look into it. It seemed like that was the consensus in the commentary, that these weirdo guys were doing it, you know. We're baptizing the dead. We're having baptisms for the dead. And it was interesting as I went further into it, because even that term was a little ambiguous, because sometimes it referred to the phenomenon I just described, wherein someone is baptized by proxy for a dead individual. But apparently some groups in the very beginning, and again, I'm not saying this is like sound theologically, like it literally might have been some like Gnostic cults or something, but were like baptizing like the dead bodies. Like if someone died and they weren't baptized and they were really worried about it, they would like baptize the dead in that sense. It's really interesting looking into it. Okay. I'm going to come in here with a little bit of this bread color. Perfect. And we're killing it right now. Okay. So now we got to go off the. We got a little color in there too. So this is going really well, but now we kind of got to go off the cuff a little bit, because I don't really know what we should put down here. I kind of feel like we should just roll with some things that are in my mind and just kind of see what happens. I don't really know what it's going to end up being a picture of, but let's just roll with it, honestly. Let's see, did I miss anything interesting? I'm drinking wine and doing pottery while listening. Nice. Very fitting. Another big theological question. Are you familiar with the idea of the reprobate mind? And if so, any thoughts? Yeah, I haven't fully looked into that in terms of its like background and everything. If anyone gets motivated and looks into it and wants to tell me, let me know. If I ever mention something on Twitter or on here or wherever, and you get up the motivation to look into it and you find something interesting, like, you can definitely tell me. I've really only seen that in more modern Protestant-y stuff. I've heard Baptists use that term. I know it is like used classically in some sense, but I think it refers to a different concept. But the reprobate mind, I don't even know if I'm saying it correctly. But yeah, basically it's some people have this idea that like you can go kind of like too far over the edge, and then I guess speaking biblically, it's like your heart is like totally hardened and that's it. It's like game over for you and then you can't be saved. I mean, that's kind of it, right? I don't know. I don't know if that's really an accurate description of it, but it does kind of trigger a few like alarm bells in my mind in a way. I mean, one thing I picked up from listening, so I'm going to paint like a little city on this cloud, and we're going to have this like winged city like ascending in the sky. I think it'd be cool. It relates to a few things I'm reading. You know, I'm talking about a lot of things at once, so. But one thing I picked up from listening to a lot of like Calvinist debates, I like this guy named James White. He does a lot of debates. They're all online, and he's interesting because his position is always like 100% Bible. I mean, of course, a lot of people think that, but he always like appeals to the Bible. It's basically his like maximum standard, you could say. And one thing the Calvinists say sometimes when they're arguing is that they want to preserve like God's sovereignty above all things. So like, I feel like, this is just my assessment, but But if you get in an argument with them about something, or if they start like debating something, sometimes they'll appeal to that. They'll appeal to, but at the end of the day, can't God do anything? And that's one of their anchors of their thought. Of course, that's obviously correct, but you can build a thought system by emphasizing all different things. But when people mention stuff like that, it does trigger some things in my mind where I'm like, well, at the end of the day, though, like I said, can't God do anything, right? So I think maybe that's something I picked up from them along the way, like preserving God's sovereignty. I don't really know. I mean, it's a weird mess of, once you get people's free will and God's will intersecting, you really get into like a messy situation. But I don't know, if someone could do something and then make themselves unsavable, then what if God wanted to save them, right? You kind of get into like a little bit of a theological mess there, don't you think? I could be wrong though, but that's my instinct to that question. But I haven't looked into it too much, or what its like classical precedence is or anything like that. So I'm just going to shade up these buildings here. I thought we'd throw in these cities because something else on my radar, this is like just interesting stuff on my radar episode, is the New Jerusalem, Heavenly City, Revelation, all that stuff. In the Book of Abraham, which is this Mormon thing I read, it's all about, not all about, but it mentions a lot of Enoch. Enoch is like Noah's grandfather or great-great-grandfather. And in there, it's pretty wild, actually. He like builds a city, and then the city like ascends into the heavens, and it's like waiting there for something in the future. And I read that, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Enoch, like the Book of Enoch. Some people might not know. Book of Enoch is classic, like Nephilim, Watchers. That means like giants on the earth and angels doing weird stuff. It's pretty classical. If you're into weird things and are also Christian, you'd probably check out the Book of Enoch. I thought, oh, it's interesting, Enoch. I haven't thought about Enoch in a long time. And then when I was reading along in Genesis, doing the Melchizedek stuff, I think it's even mentioned in Hebrews, actually. It mentions Enoch being lifted up into heaven. And that's something I picked up a little bit when I was doing more like esoterica studies. I didn't go back into Genesis to check on it, but I think it's mentioned that Enoch, or it's implied, didn't die, right? That he was lifted up into heaven. Just taken up there. And it's interesting. It's something I kind of want to look into. I have like 100, you have your internet browser open and you have like tabs open. That's my mind right now. I have like 1,000 tabs open in my mind of things like, oh, I have to go back to this, and I have to go back to this. Eventually I do want to hit the Book of Enoch. I don't know. I can't really direct the flow of everything. Sometimes I think I can, but I really obviously can't. I would like to do some like Apocrypha and extra biblical text stuff. Part of me thinks the next big thing we're going to hit is Genesis and things like that. So we'll see how it goes. Reading Hebrews felt really good, to be honest with you. Going in and just reading in the text. I mentioned I watch a lot of debates. I had this moment while I was reading it where I was like, oh yeah, I can just read this stuff. I can just go in and like literally see what this says. And of course I know that's the case, intellectually, but it really made me want to hit the scripture a little bit more than I have been. A little bit more than I have been. So maybe that'll be the next big thing we do. Not really sure. Not really sure what the next move is. I'm just going to come in and bring this like wing color that I got going on. I'm going to bring it up, and I'm going to leave some room around the city. I like these two colors together. Maybe we'll see if we can bring out some of this purple. I'm going to get a little bit of a glow around the city right now. I'm going to pick up the cadmium here. This is looking pretty cool, honestly. Let's see, anything else I should mention before we just go totally free form, off the cuff, mentioning random stuff? Not really. That's basically all the random topics that I've hit. I feel like I definitely hit a little bit of a node of new things to look into. So I'm pretty stoked about that. I have the new shirts here for the studio that I'm going to drop soon. But theology-wise, study-wise, that's basically where I'm at. No one tagged me recently. No one said anything recently. All right, cool. Then I will continue to talk about whatever I want. Okay, so down here, this is looking pretty cool, honestly. Okay, let's pause for a second. We're doing really well here. where do we want to keep taking it? It's 7:50, so we don't need to like start wrapping it up right now, but we want to think about where we're going. We should push like the priest king thing a little bit. So, I mean, obviously this is always my MO, but a crown up here would be really cool. And then I was thinking priest-wise. Priest makes me think of a staff, right? Priest and staff have a certain relationship. We could do crown and staff. Then we're going to start having a very horizontal composition up here. It's going to be like very dense. It could be a good thing. It might not be the worst thing in the world. I'm feeling a little bit of tension because the staff is a long, thin thing, and the crown is like a little dense rectangle. So I don't really think they would balance each other out. Let's see. I'm not really sure how we should play this. What I'm thinking composition-wise, composition means how a picture is laid out in case people don't know, is that I think we're going to have like a nice triangle. I think we're just going to have like a big like triangle pick, which is a nice like sort of dynamic composition. It's easy with the cloud. You can have anything coming out of a cloud. That's a classic maneuver that I do all the time. But I really want to see how we should address this halo up here. I mean, we could put the crown and then put the staff coming through it. You know what we could do? We could have the crown up here and then have the staff horizontally, like coming across, like behind the head. I think that's the move. Once I said that, I'm like, yeah, obviously we should do that. Let's make that happen. I feel like the crown should be gold color, but okay. So I'm letting you into the pictorial thinking aspect of what's going on right now. I feel like the crown should be gold color, but this actually is already gold color. And then the next step that I'm making in my mind is, all right, well, we can use, this color. This is kind of like gold color, brassy. But the problem is we already used that for the bread. So if I use the crown color, the bread color, then all of a sudden these two things are tied together. These two things aren't. Is there another color we can make the crown? We can go through it together. I mean, it could be a darker brown, but then it's going to be super high contrast. I like the level of contrast we have right now. So we're in a little bit of a bind. My friends. You know what I think we're going to do is, I just figured it out. We're going to take this color and make the crown the bread color, so that will be the same. And then easy solution, we'll just make the staff this red over here. So actually, it'll kind of bring everything together. That's what we're going to do right now. It's a perfect move. I don't know if I'll make the crown just an outline or not. Let's see. I don't really know how I'm going to do this. I'm just going to go for it. Perfect. But in terms of just frankly super weird stuff, I mean, sometimes I feel like I feel like my oath to the internet is that I'm never going to like censor myself and like be careful what I say. I kind of just let you guys know what I'm thinking all the time. But in terms of really weird stuff, the like Joseph Smith writing, the Pearl of Great Price stuff has been a trip, man. It's crazy. It's crazy, man. In the book of Moses like goes up on this mountain and talks to God, and it's like this whole conversation they have. And like God talks about creating like all these universes and all this stuff. It's pretty crazy, man. And then in the book of Abraham, like I said before, it's all about Enoch. And they're really short. They take like, I don't know, like an hour to read. They're really, really tiny. And in the book of Abraham, it's mostly about Enoch. It starts out with Abraham in the beginning. But like I said, Enoch builds this city. He literally builds like a whole city, and then it's populated, and then that city gets taken up into the heavens, and it's waiting for its terrestrial counterpart to be built in the future, and that's when the city will like come back down and share the space again with its terrestrial counterpart, I guess. It was pretty interesting, man. I had a really good time reading all that stuff, to be completely honest with you. Oh, Book of Mormon stuff. Oh, is there anything crazy in the Book of Mormon we should talk about? That was pretty cool, man. It was pretty cool. Honestly, I didn't really expect it to be as, no offense if anyone is Mormon here, I didn't really expect it to be as enjoyable as it was, to be totally honest with you. I don't know what I expected, but again, if I'm just, not worried about being impolite, just going kind of off the cuff, it has almost like a fantasy vibe in a positive way. You're reading about all these battles and people are killing each other, and then 1 minute it's zoomed in, and I think we talked about this a little bit. 1 minute it's zoomed in, and you're following these people on this journey, and then it zooms out, and cities are being overtaken and falling, and the way the people groups interact is super interesting, because they start out as these two different spiritual groups kind of, and then they become two different more ethnic-y groups, but then it is more spiritual groups, people from one group start converting to the other. And okay, wait, I do want to keep talking about that, but let's see. That was a really good call with the colors up here. Okay, we're doing good. We're doing good here. We're going to have to address this. Maybe something here, and then something has to be down here. I try not to pull stock maneuvers, but I feel like a drop of blood coming down here is going to be pretty solid. We talked a little bit about blood. I mean, it's just going to look awesome, so we're obviously going to do that right now. Honestly, I don't know if we talked about this. I mentioned it on Patreon. I did kind of a write-up on my just off-the-cuff thoughts about finishing the Book of Mormon 1 week. And one of the most interesting parts was that the book ends almost in a negative way. And I've read a lot of spiritual texts. Not that I'm some scholar or something, but I've read a lot of them. I mean, I'm looking at my bookshelf over here. And it was really unique to find one. I don't want to say it ends on a negative note, but at the end, the people it's talking about, I mean, they die. They go extinct. It describes this group of people that used to live in the Americas. They're called the Nephites. And then at the end, it just doesn't work out for them. And they get run over by the other group and they die. And so I don't want to say it ends on a downer, because of course it ends optimistically ultimately. There's something really interesting, just even from a creative, I guess you could even say a literary perspective. You could be neutral about it. Where, you're reading along and it's yeah, boom, that didn't work out for them. They died. That's it. Even in the Bible, I was talking to someone else about it, things go poorly and, people do the wrong thing and people get swallowed up in a pit and people die and, all this stuff. But in the end, it's well, but then Jesus came and it's pretty awesome, actually. But, you finish, you're 10 pages from the end and it's yeah, and then these two guys fell into a pile and just died. That's it, buddy. It was pretty powerful, honestly. I was wow. I never had a theological text hit me with yep, and then this people, 100% didn't work out for them, I guess you could say. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but it was pretty interesting. Okay, so I lost my highlight down here. So I'm going to pick this up really quick. Cool. Okay, I want to get this fade right here. Perfect. Okay. This is really intense. This is way more high contrast than I thought, but it's okay. We're going to start kind of thinking about how we're going to wrap it up. I feel like maybe I can get away with just pulling the halo down here. So that's kind of trifecta. We have the red but it's fine. Doesn't matter. I guess I'll tell you guys what my favorite part was, since I brought it up. My favorite part was, so, when I was reading it, I'm reading it from a few different angles. Obviously I'm interested in just religious texts in general. I'm also a creative guy, also American stuff, so I'm reading it from all these different angles. I like writing, spiritually, I like weird spiritual stuff. So I'm reading it for a variety of reasons. But in terms of narrative, in terms of the creative aspect of it, I really like this fade out over here, by the way. So 3/4 of the way through, maybe a little bit further than that, there's a story within a story. They find another story inside the story that you're reading. You're reading these books. It's like the Bible. It's different books, And it almost goes back in time. They find this other story about this group called the Jaredites. So they're talking about them, and it doesn't work out for them either. They die too. So you're almost nestled within this story within a story. And the person writing it, I think it's in this book called the Book of Ether. Sorry, it keeps minimizing my camera thing, and I keep having to pull it up. It's in this book called the Book of Ether. And so the guy writing it, his name's Ether. Maybe it's Ether, I don't know. And there's this massive battle. I'm just going to poorly tell this story. there's this massive battle between the Jaredites and this other group. I think I'm getting this right. You know, I'm don't like, you know, quote me on this. This huge, like, massive battle finally, and this like civilizational shifts, like they're coming at each other from different angles, and finally, you know, the group pins up on this hill, and I think they're there for like years, like prepping for this final battle. And this guy Ether lives in this little like rock enclave, like this little rock incropping, and that's how he's watching the battle. And the battle starts with like seemingly like, you know, thousands of people, and they fight, and it's giving you the numbers, and it's just clocking down the numbers. So it starts with like thousands of people, and then it's like going down further and further and further, and eventually it's like hundreds of people, and then finally it gets to this point where it's even lower than that. And it says, you know, what started to happen is the men would just like fight all day, and then when it got dark, they would throw their swords down and just sleep on their swords and wake up and start fighting again. And I don't know if it's how it is or how I remember it. It's giving you the numbers. It's going down, more and more people are dying. And finally, it's just a handful of dudes, and they're fighting it out. And finally, it's just the two leaders left, just the two leaders of both sides. And they're fighting, and they're sword fighting, and then what happens is they both are like almost about to collapse from blood loss, I think. And one of the guys finally gets the other guy and cuts his head off. And then I think they both die there. I think they both just collapse into like a pile. I'm pretty sure that's what happens. It's super epic, honestly. It's really epic. You know, I'm reading along, and like I read the whole thing because I've had insomnia, which is kind of rare for me. So I'm up at like 3 a.m. on my couch reading this, and I'm like, wow, I didn't see that coming. It's pretty cool. It's a really good time, honestly. Okay, there's further stories I could mention from there, but I really enjoyed it for a variety of reasons. Okay, let's see what's going on here. Let's get focused. Let's get focused again. Okay, this is looking pretty solid, man. This is looking pretty solid. Yeah, I really feel like we got to address this right here. It's going to be the last thing we're going to address, I think. I could start poking in here, but one thing that I like thinking of, there's all different compositional forms you can get going, but this is a really good tip if you make pictures or images. Maybe this applies to other art forms, I don't know. But you can get away sometimes with having nothing in the center and really, really busyness all around that nothing. That's something I picked up from something called mannerist art. It's like the art that takes over after the Renaissance. It's called mannerism, if anyone wants to look into it. But sometimes their pictures have that. They have almost like nothing in the middle and just really busyness around the outside. So I don't want to disturb that. I think if we put something in here, all of a sudden it's going to be the same level of detail, uniformly covering everything. We don't want that, so we're going to let this ride right here. Up here in the middle, I don't really know. I almost feel like we should just put a gradient in here. We could put like an eye or something, but then we're in like really weird territory. I really don't want to do that. You know, I got a few ideas right now. Let's make a few things happen right now. We're going to start thinking about wrapping it up. If anyone wants to ask me anything else, they can. I see people are having an interesting conversation in the chat. That's great. I encourage that. Okay, so I'm going to come in here, and what I'm going to do is, since I kind of wanted to channel this like visionary, kind of light generating, you know, situation, I'm just going to come in and put in these lines. It's not dark enough, though. You can't see the start of the lines. And that could be a good thing or a bad thing. Let's just roll with it. Let's see how it goes. So I'm going to come in and put these, I don't really know what to call them. Sometimes in older pictures, you'll see these alternating wavy lines. Perfect. And then straight lines coming out of the sun. Usually that represents the light and the heat of the sun. The wavy lines being the heat, and then the straight lines being the light. But here, I think that it might just give us the feel that we want. And here I'm going to come back on the other side. It's funny, they're like, kind of like stressed lines or something, like in a comic book or something, until I put the straight lines in. Almost like he's like stressed out, right? There's like these lines pouring off of his head. Perfect. Come around here. Great. What's the philosophy undergirding mannerist art with regards to emptiness surrounded by business? Someone just asked me that. Spoon of Salty asked me that. You know, it's interesting, man. Mannerism to me is like the most underappreciated art movement in Western civilization, probably. Everyone knows the Renaissance, but no one really knows about mannerism. And I think it's like the most interesting one because, in my view, you know, we had the Renaissance, and it's like, okay, now we can paint things real, basically. We can make things look real. We got these sculptures, and, you know, not to make it like that, but I mean, how much better is it going to get, you know, really? If you go look at a Michelangelo sculpture, I mean, how much better is it really going to get? And I think if some people haven't poked into art history, it's easy to forget that, like, all that stuff was so noteworthy because it's so much better than what came before it in terms of certain qualities. So if you look at something from like 1300, 1400, and then jump forward 100 years into the Renaissance, the jump in quality is insane. I mean, Michelangelo is really famous because he is the first sculptor to match the sculptures of antiquity in terms of certain qualities. So it's worth keeping that in mind. So, you know, you live in Italy and all of a sudden you just had the generation, you know, you had Leonardo da Vinci, then you get Michelangelo, then you get Raphael. That's the order, by the way. And now it's kind of like, all right, well, what do we do now? Right? Like, I mean, you can kind of get better, but I mean, are you really going to get better than Raphael paintings? I mean, it's going to be pretty difficult. Maybe you can't even. Maybe you're sitting there and you're like, well, I can't. So in my opinion, when mannerism happens, it's really when people start not playing around, but start pushing things in a direction other than how realistic can we make this. And that's when things get super interesting. So you get a lot of like really long bodies, a lot of weird compositions. In my opinion, it's basically Western artists hitting the wall for the first time of, okay, we can make things look realistic, now what? And they're really trying to just do more interesting things and push it in some way. So I wouldn't really say it's like one philosophy or something that makes it that way, but it's really more the artistic situation, honestly. And I think that that's really, really, really interesting. You can look up a painting called Pontormo's Deposition. It's probably one of my favorite paintings of all time. It's a deposition of Christ, but the colors are almost like vaporwave, and the way it's laid out is really strange. It's in this really tiny church in Italy. I went there, actually. If I'm being fair, you could say the colors are really crazy, bright, and weird, because when you go in this church, it's actually tucked in this back corner of the church, and it's really dark. And Pontormo did this other painting for another church that was like sort of normal Renaissance color. And when he did it, if you go to that church, you like can't even really see it. I don't know. I never went there. I'm hearing this secondhand. It's like dark in the corner, and it seems really dark. You know, you're in your studio, your painting studio, and it has really great light. And you bring it to a church, they put your painting in the corner. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, you can't really see it. So that could be one reason why the colors are like that. But even the composition is really strange. There's some arms that like don't lead back to hands. Just the way it's arranged is really interesting. It's a really weird vibe in the painting. It's called Pontormo's Deposition. And then it gets weirder. There's a painter called Parmigianino. Parmesan, like Parmesan cheese. He made a painting. It's colloquially, I really doubt he called it this, but it's called the Madonna of the Long Neck. And it's this Virgin Mary image, and she has like a crazy long neck, and she's holding a baby Jesus, but the baby is kind of like an adult almost. Like he has like fully formed legs and arms. It's really bizarre, honestly. There's a few ones like that. There's a Visitation that's really cool. Maybe we'll do an episode on this one time, but there's a Visitation that's really cool, and it might be by Parmigianino. If you Google like Visitation mannerism, it'll probably come up. Oh, look at this fade I got while I'm talking right here. Oh, look at that. Dude, painting is just... Dude, what are we doing here right now? So good. Oh, the red's just wrapping around. I'm just going to let it happen. Just going to let it happen right now. Maybe I'm going to get some of this magenta down here. Anyway, there's a Visitation. Some people don't know, but if you go into classical art history, every artist kind of does these different scenes that are pretty standard. You know, so you have the Deposition when they're taking Christ down. You have the Visitation when... Elizabeth, I think it is, or is it St. Anne? No, it's Elizabeth. Elizabeth and Mary meet up and they're both pregnant. You know, you have these standard scenes, and it's almost like musical forms because each artist has like their take on this thing. Like, oh, let's look at Raphael's Transfiguration. Let's look at this guy's Transfiguration. Oh, what did this guy do for the Transfiguration? So you have like 100 themes or so, probably less than that everyone does. And there's a Visitation. It's really weird. I might be mixing up two paintings. I don't think I am now. So there's Elizabeth. Is it Elizabeth? I'm just going off the cuff here. I didn't research this for the show. And Mary, and they're talking, But then so they're looking at each other. And then there's two like carbon copies of them looking out at the viewer. So that's in and of itself bizarre. Like they're looking at each other, and then almost like Photoshop, click, 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 over. Then they're looking out at the viewer. So it's really strange. And then if you look at where they are, all of a sudden you notice they're on this city street, but they're almost like 30 or 40 feet tall. Like it looks like they're in a normal space, but when you really look at the details, it's really strange. And then if you look way down in the corner, the only thing giving you a sense of the size. So they're in this street and there's buildings, but it's like, are the buildings really small? Are they really tall? There's this tiny little dude. There's just one tiny little guy that then implies that they're like 30 or 40 feet tall. It's really, really, really strange. It's really a really odd painting. So yeah, that's basically mannerism. Anyway, if anyone goes on a mannerism kick, look up Michelangelo's unfinished sculptures also, by the way. I'm not going to go into it right now, but that's a breadcrumb for you guys. Some really cool stuff there. Anyway, back to what we're doing here. I think we're pretty good. I'm going to I really like this gradient, so I'm going to put a little bit of this gradient up over here to kind of cement the triangle kind of composition we have going on, but otherwise I think we're approaching a pretty good spot. I wanted this to be sort of a loose, like almost sketching painting session, and I think we did a really good job at that. What I'm going to try and do right now is bring in this color, but then I'm going to dab it up with a paper towel to see if I can just... So I'm going to go pretty quickly right here. I actually don't know if this is going to work or not. But now we're just going crazy. So I'm going to see if I can just get it before it sinks too much into the fibers. Oh man, this is crazy now. I don't know if this was a good idea, but it's okay. Yeah, it looks pretty good actually. And then I have to grab this. Boom. Oh yeah, that was such a good call. Oh. Perfect. Perfect. Oh, dude. Perfect. Man, that was great. I almost want this to be a little bit darker. I'm going to ruin my perfect, nice little texture right over here. It should be a little bit darker. I want to draw the eyes in. I don't know if I handled this middle space the best, but what are you going to do? I'm winging it over here. Just kind of darken up. Instead of trying to change this, I'm going to change the space around it. You can do that with painting too. If you don't like how something looks, sometimes the answer is things around it. There's a deep philosophical musing there that you can figure out for yourself. But sometimes it's the things that are surrounding something that are the problem, not the actual thing itself. You can really understand why Chinese painters made a lot of philosophical observations, because you just realize like things like that while you're working. Okay. Okay, I'm going to grab this. I'm just going to pick up that purple a little bit. Maybe I went a little bit too hard there. Okay. I'm looking at this. I'm looking at the same thing you are. It's pretty cool, honestly. It's pretty cool. We did a pretty good job here. I think we might be good. I'm gonna tone the neck a little bit and the hands, just because those spots are singing out to me. I don't want them to be like a color, but I don't want them to look unaddressed. Unaddressed is a good word for that. I'm just going to come in here and just tone it a little bit. Perfect. Let's come in here. Perfect. Nice. Got a weird vibe here, but it's actually exactly what I wanted. Nice. Okay. I think we're good. Man, this looks good. You know, I can't tell if I should get a little something going on down here. You know, because the wings are white. It's like we have this, you can see with your eyes. We have this very powerful texture, and then it's like, boom, it's over. So let's see. I'll try and fill in here, and then we're going to wrap this up. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm actually going to try and just bring the same gradient. I just want to do exactly what I did there down here. Let's see if it works, though. Now I'm winging it with you guys. I actually don't know. Don't know if this is going to work. I almost feel like I should do it the inverse, have the yellow coming up, so I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to think too much about this. Yellow, then we got the warm yellow. Oh, perfect. Coming up here. And then we got the orange lake, that transparent orange. Oh, Dude, I love laying down fat layers of pigment. It's just the most satisfying thing in the entire world. It's just really the most satisfying thing in the entire world. Okay, let's see how this looks. I don't want to dab it up too much. I mean, it looks pretty good, honestly. Nah, we got to dab it up more than that. That's too crazy. There we go. Now we are talking right now. Nice. Nice. Man, this looks good. I'm going to do the same exact thing I just did before where I just darken it a little bit under here. Oh, it's the perfect color. Just the perfect color. Nice. Okay. Okay. I think we're good. I think we're good, man. All right, I'm gonna move this away so we can see it without all the visual noise. That's another thing we obviously have to do. So I'm just gonna move this really quick. Put this down here. Cool. I think this went really well. Let's see, I'm gonna move this over there. Nice. Nice. Bring the camera down a little bit. Cool. This is a good one. If you've been here before, you know the deal. Every time at the end I say, I feel the need to recap, but you were just here, so we don't need to recap anything. But it's been a while since we did one where we were just really, there's a little bit of a shine. Just 100% like straight winging it, where we really didn't know how things were going to play out. And I think this one went really well. Since it is like a sketching one, I will say, maybe I could have handled this a little bit differently. Maybe I could have brought the pink out. I'm kind of feeling like maybe I should grab the brush right now and just bring the pink out a little bit. I'm actually going to do it right now. I'm just actually going to go over here where I just put it down. I'm just going to put a tiny bit. I almost feel like I should just bring it out like a tiny bit. Yeah, perfect. This probably isn't going to do anything, but it sates my like visual obsessiveness. Perfect. Actually, I did change it a little bit. All right, cool. So yeah, I always feel like the faces is interesting in art because I usually don't want to make it like something like this, like, oh, it's a person. Actually, no, I kind of like it now that I'm looking at it more. Red wine. I think the real winner here is the orbs. These orbs of color and like the watery color nature. This is what's usually missing when we do stuff on the show. A lot of times we get sucked into details and we're just super tightly working, but these big washes of color, that's something I want to push more. Overall, I think this is really cool. This drop is also really sick. Sitting in the sky. Cool, man. It's a very successful episode. We haven't, how long has it been? A year? We haven't had like a total failure yet. Don't jinx it. Anyway, that's the deal. That's the show. We're going to wrap it up right now. Thanks for coming by. Thanks for hanging out on the show. Iron Grid said, has a album cover vibe. Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes the square things have like an album cover feel to them. Maybe that's why. But yeah, man, it's going super well here and super exciting. I got new shirts I'm going to drop soon. Maybe I'll show you guys really quick. I'll show you guys one of the shirts. If you watch the episode all the way to the end, I'll show you one of the shirts really quick. Hold up. So I've been trying to class it up a little bit, honestly. I'll show you guys both of them. I was going to say, I'm going to post them on Patreon, but the thing is, like, they've seen them already, so it doesn't matter. They already saw it. So I've been trying to class it up a little bit. So I got this drawing here. Check this out. This is on a black shirt. I'm not going to, like, reconfigure the whole camera and everything for this right now. But I feel like the white, I've been pushing for the color so much on the shirts. I've been pushing so hard to get the shirts, like, saturated with color. But now that I step back a little bit, I feel like the lines on the shirt is sick. I was thinking about coming back in and spot coloring it, but I almost like that it's this like cacophonous, like visual. You see this guy here. You can almost like deduce it, but it's also kind of crazy. I really like this one. I don't know. I think I posted that drawing on Twitter a while ago. Either way, I'm going to post that soon. This one, I feel like I nailed the kind of like classy t-shirt vibe also. Check this one out. I don't know if I'm going to brand these as like classy when I post them. It sounds kind of lame when you say it that way, but this one's on this brown shirt. So I'm trying to expand out of black shirts. I literally wear a black shirt every day. I'm wearing one right now. I'm wearing the St. Augustine shirt literally right now. But this one's on this brown shirt. So I made this graphic and I feel like it really fits the brown in a way. I got this like friar, this like monk on here. And I tried to get the colors like woven into the shirt. I don't know. I really like how this one turned out too. I actually don't think I posted this drawing yet on Twitter, so check it out. Yeah. Cool. It's my own art show where I show my own art and then I say, oh, it's great. Look at that art. That's some great art. Anyway, thanks for coming through. Thanks for hanging out. We got a lot of topics to look into here, so it's a very exciting time. If you look into anything cool that I mentioned or something on your own, let me know. Otherwise, that's the show. Thank you for coming by. Thank you for doing the spiritual work that I know you're doing. Oh, word? I got a super chat. That's how I'll end the show. Blah000 says, can you make polos so I can wear one to work? Yo, yeah, I'm trying to expand out of t-shirts only. So yeah, I'm actually going to, since you super chatted me, I'm grabbing a pen. I'm going to write it down. It's official. Can you see? Boom. Made the note for the studio. Cool. So yeah, I will work on that. DM me on Twitter if you want. Otherwise, I'll see about doing it. But it might take a second. Because I have to like order them, make sure they're dope before I'm like vending them. Anyway, that's the deal. Boom. Our little oasis of painting and color situationing is wrapping up. And we are heading back